into the greenhouse. It is a beautiful blue sky, warm day today. It's late spring and it's reading 31 degrees in the shade. So quite a warm day. And I'm talking about the management of heat and humidity in the greenhouse. My successes and failures. Now, temperature, particularly heat and humidity in a greenhouse, are often interrelated. Most of us would probably live in a climate zone between zone 4 and zone 7, where it gets warm enough during the summers to be problematic in a greenhouse. In the winter, the greenhouse is very beneficial for keeping the heat, but in many of the climate zones that we normally live in, the temperature in the summer or the late spring can get significantly warm. And if you're intending to be planting inside the greenhouse like I am throughout the year, you need to be able to regulate the temperature significantly to keep it within a narrow range in order for the plants to survive. If you are just using your greenhouse for raising seeds, then that shouldn't be a great issue, because in the winter you can raise your seeds in the greenhouse and keep it warm and plant them outside, and in the summer you can simply raise your seeds outside when it's warm enough, and that might not be as much of an issue unless you're planning to plant and use the inside environment of your greenhouse throughout the year. At this sort of temperature externally inside a greenhouse, it can be counterproductively hot and humid, particularly in the middle of summer in the greenhouse, and many of your plants will not survive that. This video will serve to outline the methods I've tried or plan to try to regulate the temperature and humidity so that I can plant inside the greenhouse throughout the year. I like planting inside the greenhouse because it's a controlled environment to a degree, and I can keep the insects and pests away, and so require less use of pesticides and the like. Now, the management of temperature, as I said, they're interrelated, but let's start off with temperature. In my greenhouse I've got two reasonably large vents. It's a 6 by 6 meter greenhouse, and in the summer that is nowhere near, or even in the late spring, that is nowhere near enough to vent all the heat and in some cases the humidity from the greenhouse. So to a degree that is a bit of a failing. If I had to do it again, I'd probably create much bigger roof vents. Now what you'll see, and some of you may have seen videos before, I've vented almost every lower side panel of the greenhouse, with exception to the one on the left on the far back there, and I put insect screens to keep the bugs out in order to vent it significantly. Now I'm using the greenhouse to plant throughout the year, as I've said, and it has been necessary to increase the venting significantly to allow me to plant through the late spring and into the summer and into early autumn. If I had my chance again, I would probably put these screens on the upper panels to allow more of the heat to escape. As it is, the top part of the greenhouse still traps a reasonable amount of heat, and we'll have a look at that. The digital thermostats read 39 or 40 degrees, about 20% humidity. At this temperature, most of your leafy green vegetables and plants will not tolerate it very well or suffer a bit. And indeed, if I didn't have all these venting mechanisms, you will probably find that it will reach in excess of 50 degrees here very easily, and it will be probably nearly impossible to keep your plants alive at those temperatures. So additionally, I cool the greenhouse using fans, trying to evacuate some of this hot air from the place. You see one fan there that blows out of that vent there, and over there in the distance is another fan blowing out there. Now those are bilge fans that are used in boats and things to evacuate air, so they put through quite a reasonable volume of air, but even so, that's not adequate to keep this place cool. I would like it a lot cooler. So these fans, they generate a lot of noise and consume an enormous amount of electricity from my solar batteries, and so they're not very effective or energy efficient, and the noise that they've created, the neighbor doesn't like very much, and so I've had to disable them. So that is one of the failings that I've had there. Now I thought I'd use some little computer fans to try and vacate some of the air. Now that works all right in the winter, on a hot sunny day in winter, but those fans don't push enough air out and move enough air to significantly impact the temperature on a hot late spring day or summer's day. So if you're wanting to have an effective fan system, you'd have to have a very large fan and maybe put it high up on the front and the back of the greenhouse, and evacuate the air that way. But I suspect you're going to need supplemental venting, much like the venting I have on the sides here. And as I said, if I had to do it again, I'd probably put the vents higher up to vacate more of the hot air that's trapped higher up. Use of an external shade cloth. Now, I believe that would be the most effective way of reducing the heat in the greenhouse. And you can see here the shade cloth covering most of one side of the roof, the side that faces north, being here in the southern hemisphere. And you can see the shade cloth ends there, and it doesn't go all the way in this situation, but you can extend that shade cloth significantly to create significant shading and reduce the temperature in that way. You can see this area down here is partially shaded, but provides enough light for the plants to grow. And towards the back of the greenhouse, facing west, is another shade cloth. This one almost impervious to light, blocking out some 97% of the sunlight, and that helps to again reduce the heat and light coming through in the late afternoon. It only covers part of the back wall, and ideally, if I wanted to reduce the temperature further, I could add another one on the other side. So shade cloths are possibly one of the best ways to reduce the heat in a greenhouse. However, in a greenhouse like this, which has a very high roof, it's very difficult to get a very big shade cloth over the top and cover the entire roof. But if yours is a small greenhouse, then it might be the easiest method to control heat in the hotter months. Others suggest using shade cloth that is white in color or light color to allow the appropriate colors of the spectrum of light to come through in order to meet the requirements of the growing plants. As you can see, despite all these measures, the venting, the shade cloth and the fans, the temperature inside on a late spring day here in southwestern Sydney is still 40 degrees and climbing. If you are setting out to build a greenhouse and want to plant through all seasons, plan it so that you can significantly vent the place. Vent the entire roof if you can, and vent the upper sides in particular, or create it in such a way that you can turn the whole place into a shade house rather than an enclosed greenhouse for the summer. Now, one thing I'm trying is the use of shading plants. Now, this is a golden grape tomato plant. It's an indeterminate tomato, so in a greenhouse it'll grow through the winter and through the summer and through the winter again, possibly for a couple of years if you train it well and look after it. And here it's providing shade and filtered light to the spinach underneath. Now, the mistake I've made here is that I put my water spinach under it. Now, the water spinach likes to have direct sunlight and a lot of heat, and so that's a bit of a mistake there. But this is perpetual spinach and it doesn't mind growing in direct sunlight or filtered light like this. In fact, it looks like in the summer it'll enjoy the filtered light, although the perpetual spinach grows reasonably well out here in the direct sunlight as well. But by creating this artificial green canopy and filtering the light, you can create an environment for the plants underneath that are conducive to growing in a lower temperature and not in so much direct light and heat. At the same time, you've got other fruit and bearing vegetables growing on top, making the most of your greenhouse space. This over here is sun gold tomatoes. I had them in this position before, but I've regrown them, and I plan to train them to climb up and across the horizontal trellis up here to provide a bit of shade around that garden bed and reduce the heat in the greenhouse that way. And what else you'll see here, climbing beans. And I'm trialing this out. I'm not sure how much shade they will provide, but I'm training them to climb up into these, again, horizontal trellises up here and provide a degree of filtered light down to the lower parts of the greenhouse and hopefully reduce the heat in that way. So more climbing beans just over there, and they're being trained and hopefully will come up and provide some relief in the high temperatures. Not sure how that will go, but it's experimental and we'll see how we go. Now to humidity. Now, the most detrimental effect of humidity in my greenhouse was its contribution to fungal diseases like tomato leaf mold. And ironically, did this not occur during the heat of the day, as the surfaces of the greenhouse, including the plant leaves, were too hot to collect condensation, and the automatic vents were open, allowing the vapor to escape. But at night, when the vents closed, trapping in the air moisture, that's when the humidity increased. The soil remained hot, still producing evaporation, and then condenses not only on the cool surfaces of the roof, but also on the plant leaves that cool faster than most things in the greenhouse, due to the fact that the leaves have very minimal thermal mass. So consequently they cool down faster than anything else and collect a lot of the condensation, and with the moisture, the excess moisture, it encourages mold to proliferate on both plants as well as the upper hard surfaces, like the joists and the walls. Also unanticipated was humidity during winter. The amount of condensation being greatest due to the cool surfaces, and evaporation still occurring, being trapped because the auto vents did not open due to the low ambient temperature of the greenhouse. And so ironically, in the middle of winter, when all the vents were closed, the roof vents included, we trapped an enormous amount of humidity, and the humidity encourages other pests like whitefly and things like that, so it can be a pain. So I've tried a few things to address the humidity issue, and some of them have failed. Here is a very small fan up there, triggered by a sensor on the far side of the roof that is triggered when there's enough condensation to form droplets on the roof, and turning the fan on. Now that fan is too small and was not able to adequately evacuate the amount of humidity and condensation that occurred in the greenhouse. So that was a bit of failure. Then I tried a 12-volt dehumidifier. Now here you see the humidifier right there. 12-volt unit, run off my solar batteries. Extremely energy intensive, runs through the night, takes the condensation out of the air, but not enough. I'd need another 3 of those in this, running all night to remove the humidity that was collecting in here. So that placed a big drain on my batteries, and so I removed that from operation. That method of removal of humidity is effective if you have an abundance of energy, lots of solar panels, lots of big battery storage, but I didn't want to go down that path. The benefit of that system you would retain most of the heat in the greenhouse, and if that's your objective, then that might be the way to go for you. If you're in a climate where in winter it gets very cold and you want to retain the heat during the day into the night, then the dehumidifier is the way to go. The method I ended up using was simply leaving 2 of the vents, the lower vents, open, and closing the rest during the winter and cooler months, and that was quite effective in assisting in reducing the humidity. There was airflow, and that was very beneficial. Now, one other thing I have been trying, and it seems to be very effective to reduce the effect of the humidity inside the greenhouse on the plants, such as the tomatoes. These, with the leaves being so high up, they used to get an enormous amount of condensation on them, and they would be infested enormously rapidly with tomato leaf mold. And what I've done is I've connected several fans throughout the greenhouse, directed at those leaves and directed at other leaves of vegetables that are affected by humidity and mold, and I run them on a cycle. At night, when the it turns dark, the fans turn on for about half an hour, and then off for 2 or 2.5 hours, and then on again for half an hour, and that cycle is repeated. And that seems to be enough to significantly reduce the incidence of tomato leaf mold. These leaves here are now dying and yellowing because of age and less so from tomato leaf mold issues. Prior to using the fans on almost a daily basis, the leaves would progressively become or succumb to tomato leaf mold, and just simply walking past the tomatoes and brushing past them, there would be mold spores and mold dust released in the air, which is very unhealthy. So you can see I'm employing 3 fans now to help reduce the effects of humidity on the plants. The moving air seems to also help reduce the incidence of whitefly infestation. Last summer I had an enormous whitefly population, almost essentially uncontrollable, with repeated spraying of pyrethrin and neem oil, especially in amongst the tomato leaves. This summer there presently is no sign of whitefly, which I believe may be attributed to the air movement at night by the fans. So the fans run on that cycle essentially into morning, and then they switch off, so that as the greenhouse heats up with the sun, the vents actually open and the humidity is released. So that's a look at my experiences with heat and humidity in the greenhouse. I hope that it might help you with setting up a greenhouse. If you found it remotely useful, please like the video, and hopefully I'll speak to you again.